Good morning and welcome to Autism Live, this very special edition of Autism Live. We are live right now. It is, what is the date? I never can remember this, Traven. It's the 25th of August, 2022. And we're back in the studio. And if you watched on Monday when my desk went crashing and my little, oh, I almost broke her again. My little bobblehead, this is me, my little bobblehead. Isn't that hilarious? Went flying and her little feet broke off. But look at how well Traven was able to glue her back together. So I'm trying not to do too much to the desk this morning. You can see I already just made it go, woo. Anyway, I'm Shannon Penrod. Yes, the clown car that is me. And I'm excited to be here with you this morning because we're going to talk about something that I know you guys ask about a lot. How do I get an aide? And I want to help you to get an aide in the classroom when it's appropriate, but I also want to help you to use it to the maximum. When you have an aide, like all the things that you can do with it. And good morning to Lori and good morning to M. King. So thrilled to have you guys with us this morning. So that brings me to my next point. We're live right now on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and about a dozen other sites. And you can be writing in, especially on those big three, and I'm able to see it almost in real time, right? And that way we can have a conversation. That's really the most fun to me. I know that sometimes I get on a roll with what I'm talking about and I don't attend as well. I'm trying to be better about that because it is the most gratifying part to me when you guys are having conversations with me. So good morning. If you're, oh, and look, Traven is going to show you those sites and he's where other places where we are and encourage you to subscribe so that you know when we're going live, like this morning. By the way, for those of you who are watching this at some later date, and we are a podcast, we do podcast everywhere that there are podcasts. In fact, we are the #1 rated autism podcast because of you guys, because you download, you like, you share. We encourage you to keep doing all of those things because our content is free and I take great pride in that we want to be able to get information and hope and inspiration and resources to people all over the world that are looking for them so that they don't need to feel alone. Our mission here is to provide information and inspiration to the entire autism community, which starts with people who are on the spectrum themselves, but includes everyone who loves them. If you are somebody who loves someone on the spectrum, I'm glad that you're here because you're a part of this community. Yes, there is an entire community that is just individuals who are on the spectrum. We respect that. We're not trying to encroach upon that. We try here as much as possible to give those individuals their voice. Yes, including our Stories from the Spectrum, which is only their voice, only their voice, right? But we want to give resources to everybody in this community because if you love someone who's on the spectrum, you have skin in this game and helping support people who are on the spectrum, yeah? And that's the place that we're coming from. So Traven's going to cycle through some of the different ways you can be watching, some of the different things that you can like or subscribe to. And please spread the word in whatever way possible. You know, sometimes you have a friend and you've talked about the show and they're like, I can't find it because, you know, there's a big wide web, right? And it's hard to remember and there's a hyphen in some of our websites, although you can send them to autismnetwork.com and there's no hyphen. But if you ever want to just share us with somebody, one of the easiest thing to do is in the live show in the chat, just put the person's name that they use on Facebook, and then it'll take them right to the show. I've found that for a lot of people, that's just easier because you get a notification saying so-and-so tagged you in this video, and then you click it and you go, why? And you go, oh, now I see why. I understand why. You might want to ask their permission beforehand, but if you've talked to them and they're like, I can't find it, it's, you know, they probably are going to say, okay. In any case, if you're wondering who the heck is she, who am I want to be clear, as I was yesterday, as I'm pretty outspoken about this, that I am a proud pony. I am a parent of a neurodiverse individual. So I am not someone who is on the spectrum. I am not someone who claims to be neurodiverse myself. I am a parent. I'm a parent who wants to be an ally. I'm very proud of my son in every way, shape, and form, and always have been. But I am also a very staunch believer that individuals who are on the spectrum learn in their own way, and that we should not try to make them fit in to learn the way everybody else does, but that we should give them all the skills, all the tools to be able to do what they want to do. That is where I'm coming from. I am a former teacher, and I believe that the greatest respect and honor that you can give anyone is to believe in them, to help them to get to their dreams, and to allow them to learn, to give them the space and the time to learn, and to listen to what kind of learner they are, and to speak to them as a learner specifically. That's where I'm coming from always. That where I think where we get dicey is that there are some, we all have trauma. All of us, we all have trauma in different ways and shapes and forms. And I don't mean to make light of that, right? But we all do. We all have trigger words that set us off and we go, oh, I kind of did that to Traven the other day. He said something and autism mom gorilla went off, right? Because we have tripwires that we go, oh, no, that will not be respecting me. And I want everybody to know, if you are a person who's on the spectrum, I hear you when you say that you have concerns about making someone fit in. I hear you. And I don't want to ever disrespect that at all. But I also want to make sure that in our effort to not, say we're not going to make you fit in, that we don't say, so I'm not going to teach you. Because that, for me, on this spectrum of I'm disrespecting you by making you fit in. And I think that there are people that they're out there that are doing that, and I too want to change that. But I think there's an opposite end of it too, where it's like, so we're going to let you be exactly who you are and how you are, which means we're not going to allow you to learn. And to me, that's discriminatory. And that's the word I want to say. That's discriminatory. And I want to fight really hard for everyone to be able to get the support and to learn in the way that they learn. So, which goes hand in hand with what we're going to talk about today, because we're going to be talking about why to get an aide in the classroom, what's the plus of it, why maybe you wouldn't want to get an aide in the classroom, why maybe you wouldn't want to have someone mainstream, because everybody's different, right? But if you do feel that your child needs a one-on-one aide in the classroom, it's like, how do I get that? It seems like some magic highway that there's an on-ramp somewhere that nobody's told you how to do it. I'm going to give you the on-ramp. Because it's a very clear and distinct on-ramp, and once you get it and you know how to fight for that, it's not as hard as everybody makes it out to be. Yes, some school districts are worse than others, but then I think more importantly, when we've made the decision, okay, an aide is what's appropriate, here's how we get it, and there's going to be a little bit of a tussle, but it's doable. But then how do we use it effectively? Because a lot of people go, whew, okay, I got the aide, fabulous. Now I can go to sleep, and it's that Ron Popeil thing, set it and forget it. No, it doesn't work that way in special education. It just doesn't. We can't rely upon that. So I want to, we're gonna go through this talk. I feel like I left something out. Well, one of the things that I left out is, I know we got to do that, but there was something else that I forgot too. I always like to say to people that when I say identify as a pony, and we want to now start referring to you guys as ponies too, partners of neurodiverse individuals. How do you guys feel about that? That you could, our viewers are ponies. I'm asking everybody how you feel about it. Good morning, Susie. So thrilled that you're here. So the one thing I always like to remind you guys at the start of these parent-to-parent talks is that I'm not an expert. I am a former teacher, that's true. And I've been on both sides of the IEP table, that's true. And I have a son who's 19 years old on the spectrum and, been doing this for a lot of years. So I have some knowledge, but that does not make me an expert. And I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a special education attorney, I'm none of those things, right? What I am is somebody who has been through it, and as a former teacher, I feel like there's some tips I can give you that then you got to go figure it out with your school district, with your child. So I'm not an expert, and none of the stuff that I'm going to say to you is expert advice. I always have to give you that disclaimer. However, I care deeply about your experience and want to help you. And I owe that to you because that's what I prayed for on my bedroom floor when I was like, God of my understanding, help me to help my child. And if you do, I promise that I will turn around and help whoever I can. So I'm trying to live and breathe that every day, right? Part of that too is giving you guys good information in a wide a range of things. So I want you to watch this next, this piece that we're gonna, video that we're gonna show. Hello, Louise. I want you to see this because I think this is good information that's important for some of you that are out there. So take a look at this from our friends over at Shapiro Legal Group. A recent study funded by the National Institute of Health suggests that there may be a higher risk of autism in children whose mother took the pain reliever acetaminophen during pregnancy. Acetaminophen is the active ingredient in scores of over-the-counter products, including Tylenol, Excedrin, and Robitussin. So if your child was diagnosed with autism and you took any acetaminophen product while pregnant, this commonly recommended over-the-counter medication may be responsible, though additional research is ongoing. If you or a loved one used Tylenol or other medications containing acetaminophen while pregnant and later gave birth to a child diagnosed with autism, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Shapiro Legal Group is now evaluating potential legal claims by parents of autistic children. Call right now to see if you may be entitled to financial compensation. There are time deadlines to file a claim, so don't wait. You can reach Shapiro Legal Group at 888-657-0455. Again, that number is 888-657-0455. You can also contact Shapiro Legal Group by going to shapirolegalgroup.com/autism.
Shapiro Legal Group, PLLC, associates with attorneys throughout the country to help people nationwide, and is licensed in New York and Washington, D.C., and has its principal office at 60 East 42nd Street, New York, New York. This ad was read by a non-attorney spokesperson.
Welcome back. I want you to not only call that number, I'm going to give it to you again really quickly, 888-657-0455. Again, that's 888-657-0455. But even more importantly, I want you guys to spread the word. And tell people that you know that might qualify to file a claim. It's important stuff. All right, so now we're going to do it. We're going to talk about getting an aide and using an aide. So with my bobblehead, she's going to talk from time to time. No, I'm sorry. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. And can I just say, I was very mindful about the pictures that I used here because I love this idea about everybody's different. Every child is different. Every trajectory is different. This is why we have IEPs, because it's individualized education plan. And there's a reason why, we need that. So first of all, we need to make the determination, do we want the aide, yes or no? And sometimes people, my fat head is in the way. And we're off center, and I don't know what I did wrong, Traven, that it made it this way. But anyway, because if you don't feel like you need a one-on-one aide for your child, please do not beat yourself up. Like everyone, there is no one size fits all. And I know that sometimes I talk very adamantly about some things, but there is no one size fits all. So if you're watching us, I'm going to read through it for those of you who are listening in podcasts, but we have two columns here. And there's no shame, no foul. But if we're going to proceed with the aide, we need to know why. So if you are somebody who says, I just don't feel like we're getting enough done with academics, and we were behind when we started school, and we want to get more to academics because at some point in our child's trajectory at school, we have an expectation, or we want to give them the opportunity to see if they can get a fully qualified diploma. And so if you want that fully qualified diploma, you're going to have to maximize the amount of time that you're spending on academics. There are going to be certain skills that they're going to need to know how to do. There's a certain reading level that they need to get to, a certain comprehension level, right? And what we see is that if you have an aide, as opposed to just putting a child in special education or putting them in a mainstream situation and hoping that they get it, that with an aide, you really can maximize what the child is learning. If your child is somebody who is struggling with focus and you want to target that in relation to academics, because as a former teacher, I can tell you, you're walking down the aisles of where the students are, or you have them in a circle, you're walking around, whatever it is, you're up at the board, the smart board, you're doing something, right? And you will give an instruction to the students and you'll say, okay, let's everybody take out your math book and turn to page 34. And some of the kids will be able to track that and do that, and some of them won't. And that's all kids, right? But for a kiddo who's on the autism spectrum, who's already coming in and maybe is a little behind and focuses a little bit harder, there are gonna be little threads that they're gonna miss all day long because they're attending to all these other things sensory-wise, right? And to have an additional prompt to help them to stay on focus. And what this is, the Aide has a little sticker that they hold up that, that says, it can be, a smiley face, which reminds them, right, when I see the smiley face, that's, I gotta notice what the teacher is doing, right? It can be very unobtrusive, but it helps them to stay on focus. Aides help to promote socialization because there are little moments that happen throughout the day where your child has an opportunity. It could be as simple as somebody is passing papers back, right? And for our child, that is like, I gotta notice, first of all, I have to be able to I have to stop what I'm doing, I have to take the papers, I have to take one, I have to pass it back. Whew, that's a lot. It's a lot, it's a lot, it's a lot. And so we miss out on the socialization of the smile of the student who hands it back to us, or the person who, says something to us when we're handing it back. With an Aide, the Aide can help, either smooth that through, by helping with the passing back so that we get the socialization, or by helping the student on the playground to notice when somebody's talking to them, or to talking to the other child and saying, he just asked you a question, can you please answer it? Like, they can do all kinds of things that a teacher is way too busy to prompt. An Aide can assist the teacher with the individual student, or they can assist the teacher with other things, depending on how it's written into your IEP, right? I always felt that if my son was going to be in a classroom, as a former teacher, I knew that was going to take some more time for the teacher. And I felt that it was, the whole classroom was going to run better if my son had an Aide in there, because that was another person that the teacher could rely on. We're going to talk more about that in a second. If you have a child that has safety issues, like you're afraid of elopement, or they might have aggression. We talked about aggression yesterday. If there are any kind of safety issues, an Aide can help with that. Not because it shouldn't be that they're there to manhandle your child. No, they can be part of an antecedent modification that maybe the teacher doesn't have eyeballs on, because it's very hard to see out the back of your head when you're writing on the smartboard, okay? They can help to take good data, and if there are specific concerns, they can address the specific concerns. All right, so those are all good reasons. There are many more, and you guys can be writing in and telling us why you wanted an Aide, right? But those are just some. But now on the maybe not side, for parents who say to me things like, my child has a lot of anxiety and I don't want to pressure them academically. Academics is not where we're concerned about. If they don't ever get a diploma and they just graduate without the diploma, we really don't give two rat traps about it at all. We're not concerned about them achieving a certain, arbitrary thing for graduation. Yes, we would like them to have life skills, but the rest of it they can take and throw in a waste can. Then maybe you don't need the Aide. Some parents will say, I really don't want the stigmatization of an Aide being in the room, and if you feel very strongly about that, then you might not be a good fit for an Aide. I will tell you, there's a way to do it, that there shouldn't be any stigmatization, right? For families who are like, I don't want them mainstreamed for whatever reason, because sometimes there's a concern about, kids are mean. Neurotypical kids are like little vipers, some of them, not all of them, right? And they can be very mean. And sometimes if it's more, listen, it's your call as a parent. Sometimes we want to shelter our child more than we want them to learn something that we think is arbitrary. And if that's your case, don't feel bad about it. Don't let anybody bully you into going, oh, they have to be mainstreamed, even me. right? And it might be because you have specific concerns about why you don't want an aide, and that could be everything under the rainbow, right? And the last reason, which is a very valid one, is you don't want to have to manage it. That thing that I said on the first slide about, I think we all want school to be a thing where we set it and forget it, and it's like, oh, we got it written into the IEP, we got the aide, now I don't have to worry about it. I'm sorry. Everybody take a deep breath. That doesn't exist. If you're going to get an aide, you're going to have to manage it, or you run the potential of it not being great. So if you don't have the bandwidth to manage that, don't feel bad about saying that. Yeah. Good morning to Paula. Paula, I'm so glad that you're here. Susie said my son just got an aide this school year. He's much happier now. Again, thanks to your advice. Woohoo! Lori says my son's class has 8 littles in his kindergarten class with 2 aides. If they have an eloper, they keep 1 aide at the door. The other helps the class, and if there is an issue by the other door that leads to the other classroom, the teacher adjusts her desk table in front of that door. The bus there is also an aide on the bus there and from. He has to hold the teacher aide until he's on the bus, and he has to contact with me or my husband, or he is not dropped off without notification prior. This was already in his IEP, and it started day 1. We did not have to fight, and if we did, we would have fought until they agreed and the results were in place. You know what I love about that, Lori? I love what an advocate you're being for your child and how seriously you're taking eloping and how seriously you're making the school do it. I also love that they're taking it seriously. So good on you. That's fantastic, because what's more important than safety, right? I'm sorry. I'm sure that some people are like, academics are more important, but for me, safety comes first and then academics. So that's another reason maybe not to have a full one-on-one aid and inclusion. And I also want to point out too that that's really what we're going to be talking about today. But as Laurie points out, there's an aid in a classroom. This doesn't sound like full inclusion though to me, and that's okay too. Sometimes you got to have an aid in the special day classroom, but it's not, what you're talking about, Laurie, is not a one-on-one aid. It sounds like it's a 1-to-4 aid. In a special day, or maybe not. Is it a kindergarten class or a special day class? I'm not sure. And you don't have to disclose that. That's your business. But in any case, let's talk a little bit about some of those things that we just talked about. I pushed the button, Traven. It didn't go. There we go. Okay. Boy, I don't like how I laid this slide out. But you can always email me, shannon@autism-live.com, if you ever want any of the PowerPoints that we have done here. So take a look. I guess it's better when it's full screen. So when you're getting an aid, there's a couple of things that you're going to argue. We talked the other day about least restrictive environment. And I gave you the actual language, because what the law says is that your child has a right to FAPE, which is a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. And what I did was I put the link to the actual page, because it's hard to find. Can I tell you guys, this took me over an hour and a half to find. But I found it for you. There it is. If I were you guys, I would get this and keep it someplace safe. You can always write me for it, and it's in the PowerPoint. But notice that it's govinfo.gov, right? And it's the education code, and it's chapter 33. It's page 850, and I'm drawing your attention particularly to number 5 on those pages, and it's A, D, and E. And in each one of those, A, D, and E, it outlines clearly why your child is entitled to an aid, and that it's incumbent upon the school to prove why they should be allowed to mainstream if to the fullest extent possible, is what it says. So if you want an aid, what you're going to do is you're going to go to this site and you're going to print out 5, A, D, and E, and you're going to get very familiar with them. And you don't even have to get that familiar with them. You can just go to the school and say, here's why we're asking for an aid. Here is why we're asking for an aid. Is this going to, and if it were me, And if I had it to do over again, I would say we're asking for, clearly, I would ask for it in writing, we're asking for a one-on-one aid. I would reference these 3 things. If they give you any pushback at all, I would reference these 3 things. And then I would say to them, is this going to be a problem? Because I'll bring my lawyer the next time. If you are aware of page 855, A, D, and E, and you say that you're going to bring a lawyer, I can't imagine the crazy school district who would say to you no. Now, what they might come back and say some other things before they, totally roll over. But I think the last thing on this page is make it clear that you aren't going to back down. I am so sad to report to you that I know from having been on both sides of the table that there are a lot of parents who don't come to their IEP meeting, who don't participate in their child's IEP meeting at all, just don't show. There are parents who come in and the school says, here's what we're offering you, and the parents go, fabulous, where do I sign? There's lots and lots and lots and lots of that. And so when you go to an IEP meeting, the school literally, at some point, there's a conversation about what kind of parent do we have in the room. And is it a parent who is aware of their rights, aware of their child's rights? Is it a parent who's going to fight? And because IDEA is not fully funded, in a perfect world, every child will be given everything that they need. There is no funding for that. So schools have become reliant. I think even when, and I believe when, IDEA gets fully funded, we're still going to have people who cling to the past and try not to, overspend, right? Let's not overspend on a child's education, right? I have words for that. But it is important, if you want the aid, that you have to clearly signal to them. This does not mean coming in and yelling. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It means coming in, putting on whatever you feel the most powerful in. And yes, I did start shaving my head because I believed that it made me look meaner. And I did. And I went to IEP meetings. I brought my little muffins, as I've said before, but I would come in and I would be as firm as I could possibly be, and I would puff myself up. You know what, I used to do that thing where you stand in the Superman pose for 2 minutes before going into IEP meetings, and I would try to make myself look like somebody that if we were playing chicken, I'm willing to stand in the road. And his very first IEP meeting, somebody gave me that advice. They were like, make it clear, you're not backing down. And when you do, it's like everybody goes, oh, it's a parent who's informed, it's a parent who's not going to back down. So this one, we're going to have to go ahead and give them the aid because it says so on page 850 in the law, and they know they're going to lose. And guess what? It costs them, like probably more than $40,000 a year to give your child an aid. And I know we all go, oh, that's kind of expensive, right? If you fight them just to hire the lawyers on, that's around $15,000 just to bring in the lawyers. And they know that if they have to fight you and then you win, and they know you're going to win, now that's going to cost them $55,000 because it's going to be the $15,000 just to file the papers, $15,000. And if they actually take you to court and they know they'll lose, because there's the law on page 850, it's more money than they can afford. That's why they give in. That is why they give in. So, I'm so glad Susie got a lawyer. And, and I'm glad that you went with Tolner because they're absolutely amazing. And she says they were awesome and able to get my son all of the services we requested. Yeah. And I do want to say to you guys that getting a lawyer, if you can do it, it really will save you so much time, headache, and when the school sees that you have a lawyer, it signals things, and some school districts are still going to fight with you because they get it in their head that they can, somebody just doesn't get it, and they feel like, oh, this parent's going to talk to other parents. That certainly happened to me. They were like, oh, she's a blabbermouth. She's a big mouth. Who was it the other day that said that this school called them a big mouth? Yeah, I've had that happen too. But if you can get a lawyer to go in with you, great. Can I tell you, if you don't have the money to have a lawyer to go in, You know what I did? Because I am an evil, evil person. I asked a lawyer to send me something that I would do all those free consultations with the lawyers and and I would have specific questions, and then I would go to the next lawyer and ask the next set of questions. And I would, put it all down. And then there was one lawyer that I said, can you send me more information about this one thing that you told me? And they sent it on letterhead. And it was like a really high-powered attorney that I knew that the school district had already lost to. And so I had my big binder of things at the IEP, and I had it strategically placed so that when I opened a thing, it would fall out, the letter from the lawyer. And I was like, oh! And I grabbed it really quickly, but just enough for them to see the letterhead. And then later on, I said, well, I'm going to talk to my lawyer about this. And they assumed I had a lawyer. Letterhead. But it was specific letterhead, can I just say? Yes, I'm evil because as a mom, I'm going to do whatever it takes, short of hurting somebody. We don't want to hurt anybody, right? I would never hurt anybody. Okay, so if you go to them and you ask for the aid, even if, which I'm bad at, there we go. Even if you ask, now I don't know which way to go, Traven. Okay, this way. No, I'm still in the way. I can't bump the table. All right, oh, there, Traven can shrink me. Can you do that in my real life, Traven? Just make me small and in the corner. There we go. Okay, so there's a lot of stupid things that they say to parents. I'm sorry that I'm calling them stupid things, but they are stupid things. And people at the school should know better than to say these things to you, because a lot of it is just lies. Legal lies. And some of it they don't know better, but some of them they do. So one of the things that we hear is, well, your child isn't ready to be mainstreamed. And if they say that to you, it is incumbent upon them to tell you why. So ask them why they think that and ask for data. Now, you can ask for data in two directions. Say, show me the data on my child that says to you why they're not ready for mainstream. And schools are notoriously not good at taking data. So they're going to struggle with that. They're going to drum something else up. But as I said to a parent last week, if they're saying to you, well, our thing that we like to do is get kids ready first in the special day classroom, and then later we mainstream them. Fantastic. Doesn't that sound reasonable? Ask them how successful that has been and watch their reaction. Oh, it's so successful. It's so successful. Oh, really? You have a lot of kids? Would you say half of your kids go from being in the special day to the mainstream? Would you say half of them? And they'll go, oh, I don't know about. And then you say to them, you know what? I'd love to see the data. If you're telling me that this is effective, and I'm talking about putting my child into, you're saying it's appropriate, so let's assume it's effective if it's appropriate, right? So show me the data of how successful you've been in the past. Now, the parent that I said this to last week said, oh, well, they said it's privacy. Well, no, data that isn't tied to a person isn't private. If you can show me data that 85% of your kids who go into special ed end up going to mainstream and getting diplomas, that you're not showing me anybody's private information. I can't contact anybody. I can't go back to a family and go, how was this for your kiddo? So no, that doesn't fly. But I would be surprised if a school had data, because they don't take data on that. And you know why they don't take data? Because it is rare, and it's the parent that is always behind it. If a child goes successfully from being in a full special day program to a full mainstream and getting a diploma, it's rare. You know why? Because they don't do things in special ed to get them ready for that. It's the rare program and the rare teacher that does that. Okay, what about this redonkulous thing that they say? Your child will work their way into it. Again, ask for the data. How has this worked in the past? The aide will stigmatize your child, and if that's the case, and this is what was said to me, y'all, they said, oh, for junior high, they were like, he's been included all these years since pre-K, but now he's going to junior high, and we just don't think he'll survive because the kids are so mean. And I said to them, that's not about my child. That's about you needing a bullying program. My child has the right to a free, appropriate public education, and they don't get excluded from that because you can't handle your miscreants from saying things to him. No. Makes me mad, can you tell? How about this? There are other children more impacted than your child. That was said to me. There are other kids who are more impacted that need that funding or need the one-on-one aid. Later on, after my son had an aid, they were like, he doesn't need it anymore. And when I would ask why, what are you basing that on? Well, there are other children who are more impacted. That is not your problem. And you can say to them, I'm not here advocating for those children. And it doesn't say in the legal code, in the education code, to the maximum extent possible due to funding. In fact, to bring up funding is illegal. To say that your child can't get a free appropriate public education because they can't afford it, because they have kids that are more impacted, is literally illegal. I get hepped up, you guys. So the school can't afford it. Again, that's illegal. And if somebody says that to you, they're probably going to say it to you not in a meeting. It was said to me at pickup. And they sent somebody over and they're like, oh, it's so sad that, you're going to get your aid, but that means that we're not going to get the computers for the second grade class. And I said, really? Is that really what you're saying to me right now? Do you understand that that is illegal, what you just said to me? And she was like, oh, I didn't mean anything by it. I was like, yes, you did. You absolutely did, and how dare you? And she was like, oh, I'm sorry, please forgive me. And I was like, I'll think about it. You know what I mean? How about this one, which is a very popular one? Oh, we don't do that here. Oh my gosh, the number of times that I have heard this, or I've heard parents say that their school said, well, we don't do that here. There's another school where they do that that's 2 hours away. Or, we did that and we stopped doing it. Your child is entitled to a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment, not based on what they're currently offering. And they'll go, oh, well, we've put in place these 5 programs, so we're going to fit your child into one of those programs. No, that is not what IDEA says. Aren't you brilliant? But no. So your child, if you read what I gave you on that page 850, it outlines very clearly why your child is entitled to an aid. So other things, and they're going to offer you other things because, again, remember we talked about the money thing. So if it's going to cost them $40,000 to give you an aid and they see that you're serious about it, then they're going to try to undercut you, which this is where they're going to say to you, well, okay, fabulous, we'll give you the aid. And you go, oh my gosh, that was so much easier than I thought it was. And then they'll go, it'll be wonderful, there'll be 2 aides in the classroom, and you say, well, wait a second, how many special education students are in the classroom, because you're trying to figure out what the ratio, and they're like, oh, we can't disclose that. And you back up and you say, I'm sorry, what percentage aid are you offering me? For the services, are you offering me a 1-to-1? Are you offering me a 2-to-1? Are you offering me a 3-to-1? Are you offering me a 4-to-1? Now, some kids are going to do great with a 4-to-1 aid. And if that is what you want, then that is what you do. Some kids, that is the perfect amount, and it's perfectly fine. But let me tell you some of the cautionary statements that, and I love what Lori said, that, they have a plan for if a kid elopes, here's what we do to keep the rest of them safe. If you're going to have a less than a one-on-one, you need to have that plan, because that's when things go south. One kid has a meltdown and then everything is out the window, right? It mystifies me as a former classroom teacher, the ways in which people justify, and they're like, no. We're going to do this, we're going to do that, whatever. But if they don't have a plan, like Lori talked about, you got to be really concerned. But also, what you have to consider, especially when you're mainstreaming, if you're in the special day classroom, you don't know what all the diagnoses are of the other kids. You have no idea what their issues are. So you might have one kid at the table who hums. That would have been my son, right? and they hum constantly. Now, if your child is somebody who cannot, like sensory-wise, noise drives them crazy, now you've got an aide sitting with a kid who hums and a kid who can't stand it that the other kid is humming, right? And now, multiply that by however many kids you give this aide. And I'm going to ask you, what's the likelihood that your child is actually doing the thing that we wanted with the aide and having their learning maximized? It gets tough. It gets really, really tough. And I will tell you, because I've been in enough classrooms, that more often than not, what happens is that they'll put a mix of kids together because they're not going to put all the tough kids together with that have the most challenging behaviors with one aide, because how are they going to keep those 4 kids safe, right? So often what they will do is they'll go, okay, so we've got a 3-to-1, and so we're going to put one kid who's needs a whole bunch of support, who for sure needed a one-on-one aide. I'm just going to telling you the truth here, right? Then they're going to put a kid who occasionally needs one-to-one, and then the kid who might do some of the work on their own. Okay, but now if you pick that scenario, if you have the kiddo who is an elopement risk, who is needs things all the time, they'd be better off with a one-on-one aide. They just would. I'm just being real here. If you have the kid that's in the middle that needs support sometimes and really needs the support sometimes, but the aide is busy with the kid who needs the most support more often than not, right? And if you have the kiddo who they're like, well, we hope that they can do a lot of it on their own, it's the same as not having an aide. Only worse, because now they are saddled their entire educational experience with 2 other people, one of whom might be disruptive. I have had my child be each and every one of the kids in that scenario. In the beginning, my kid was the one who needed the most support. And other parents did not want their kid in class with my kid. I know what that feels like. I have had the kid in the middle who sometimes he needed help, but maybe he didn't need it all the time. And then I had the kid who really could do a lot of it himself, but not all the time. And I fought for all 3 of those phases for my child to have a one-on-one. And my child is in college with no supports. That's all I can tell you. I can only tell you from my experience as a teacher and a parent with my kid, you got to find your way here, right? But they are going to offer you, and I'm talking about mainstreaming here, but even in the special day classroom, they're going to offer you 3-to-1 aide. They're going to offer you a 2-to-1 aide. They're going to offer you a part-time aide, one who is just there in the morning. This mystifies me. And my response to it always was, oh, that's fabulous. Give him the aide in the morning. I'll make sure to leave a note in his lunchbox that says, don't need anything and don't have autism in the second half of the day. If you've done the studies and we've determined that what he needs, what would be appropriate is a one-on-one, and we looked at the code and he fits, because we see that he's going to do better with that, then how can you arbitrarily say he only needs it sometimes during the day? How about that when they say, well, we'll only do it during the tough subjects, English and math. But in social studies, he'll just figure it out on his own. That's them saying we don't want to pay for it. You can let them get away with it. Don't. Then a lot of times they'll say, great, we'll give you the one-on-one aide, but they're only going to give it during class time, during academics. Boy, that's sort of, and I know I was thrilled when I got that. I was like, great. But then he was having a hard time on the playground, and that affects what happens in the classroom. And I told you the other day, we fought for and got a recreational aide so that he had goals, and it's always tied to goals. If they don't have goals on the playground, then they're not going to give them an aide. If they have goals on the playground, then somebody has to be responsible for seeing that the goal is met, and that's how you get an aide on the playground. Write a goal for the playground. And if you look at the page I gave you, it says that they have to help them with life skills. Life skills is the playground. How about this? They'll offer you absolutely everything but the aide. Who was it who wrote to me the other day and said, boy, I went in and I used all the information that you told me, Shannon, and I said I want a one-on-one aide, and all of a sudden they were like, well, how about this? Let's give you more speech. Let's give you more OT. Oh yeah, they get real helpful. because those people are already on staff and it doesn't cost them anything extra. And they're going to try to give you the gift basket because they don't want to spend the 40 grand. And they'll offer you inclusion because a lot of times parents really want that mainstream piece, and they'll say, we'll give you the mainstream piece and we'll give it to you full or partial, half day, 1 hour, whatever it is you want, just without the aid. And they'll do everything that they can to talk you out of the aid. I'm just going to tell you from my experience, the law says that if your child with an aide can make it work in the classroom, then they're entitled to whatever that is. And if it's a one-on-one aide, fabulous. They'll try to say to you, no, let's try it with the 2-to-1 aide and we'll see how it goes. And then they'll report back that it's going swimmingly. Stick your heels in, and I say go for the one-on-one aide. That's my experience. It's not going to be what's right for all of you. Can I just keep iterating that? Okay, but once you have the aide, what do you do with them? And once they agree to the aide, before you do anything else, you got to talk about how we're going to communicate. Did I skip a slide, Traven, or is that my next slide? I feel like I might have skipped a slide. Let me go back and see. Oh, there we go. Once they agree, I did. Okay, once they agree to the aide, you have the right to ask about the training of the aide. They're going to tell you that you don't, but you do. In that code that I gave you, it says they have to be highly qualified. If they're working with your child, the teacher and the aide have to be highly qualified. You have the right to ask, how are they highly qualified? They can't just pull somebody in off the street with no training. You do have the right to ask if they're highly qualified. Read what I gave you. Ask them about how they're going to agree to allow you to communicate with the aide. And a lot of times they'll tell you, oh, you won't communicate with the aide, you'll communicate with the teacher. Okay, but how will I know what's going on? And you have the right to ask about that. We're going to give you some tips about things you can ask for this, but you absolutely want to ask about what their preference is. And usually I defer to the teacher. I say, how would you like this to go? You're very busy, and I want you to be about the task of educating my child and the other children in the classroom. So what would work best for you? And hear what they have to say. We're going to give you some suggestions in a minute if they don't know. I want you to ask about observation. Because what you don't want is to have them hire somebody off the street who has no skills, who sits there on their duff and does nothing, and they tell you, oh, we gave you the one-on-one aid and you got no benefit from it. So you need to ask them, so you're going to start the aid, and that after ask them how long after we have aid can I have my expert come in and observe? And they are going to freak out when you say that. But you have a right to have what the aide is doing observed by your expert. I always would send in somebody from my ABA team, and I would make arrangements with the school right at the IEP. I would say, we're going to ask for observation, and they would always tell me, if you observe, we get to observe who's observing. Fine, and they would only give us 20 minutes. Fine. I will tell you a little trick that whatever you can say, can I have your log of when you observe? Because however much they observe, you get the same amount. If they're testing your child, you get that amount of observation. You can push all these things. Liliana says, the school district hates me when I mention a request for one-on-one. Of course they do. That's straight out of their budget, Liliana. They see their books and their computers and their other aides and their secretary going, bye-bye. That's why. Don't get emotional about it. Don't take it personal. Walk with pride that they hate you. It means you're doing it right. I always asked about consultation. What because I'm a control freak. If you know me, you know that about me. And I didn't want to just take it for their word that their person was highly trained. So what I would always build it into the contract. I knew that I had a really good ABA provider who could train one-on-one aides. In fact, they had their own one-on-one aides, but my school would not contract with them. But I said, how about if they come in for a certain amount of time and consult or train? The teacher, the aide, whatever. In the beginning, I argued that I wanted my ABA aide to come in for 2 weeks of training when he was in kindergarten. Then after that, I would argue for 1 week of training. And then after that, eventually it became that I had 10 hours of consultation where they could come in to BIP meetings, and it was built right into the contract, and they paid for it. Yes. You know why they paid for it? Because after the first time and they saw how good my ABA provider was, they wanted the training, and they would bring other people into the classroom for the training. So they were happy to pay for it. They were literally happy to pay for it, but that took a while. But here's the biggest piece of advice that I want to give you is that you want to volunteer, volunteer, volunteer. You are never going to know what's going on in that classroom if you don't volunteer. And so I know you're busy. I know you're overwhelmed, but whatever age your child is, you want to sign up to volunteer. Have it be something that where you can, as much as possible, have eyes on your child. In the beginning, they're going to be sneaky and they're going to assign you to the copy room where you're not going to have eyes on your child. But I'll tell you what, if you do good in the copy room, eventually you'll wheedle your way into the classroom and you'll be able to see what's going on, and you will learn all kinds of everything, right? So, if there's an opportunity, if your kid is little enough, sign up to be either the room mother or the room dad, or to co-do it with somebody else. That's always great. When you can do it with somebody else, so it's not all on you, but you'll be at every party, you'll be a part of planning the parties, you'll know what's going on, you'll make sure that the aide and the teacher get a nice holiday gift. I'm telling you, volunteer, volunteer, volunteer. It is how you will have eyes on the situation, and whether you have a good aide or one that is tragically ill-informed, you're going to be able to see it, and people will be on their best behavior, which is what you want. They'll be like showing you what good educators they are. Do it. Volunteer, volunteer, volunteer. They won't let you come and observe. They won't let you just come and sit in the classroom, but you can come and wash the dishes and put paint into the little cups, and you can set up the science experiment. They'll let you do all of that. Sign up and do that. I'm telling you, you'll enjoy it too, and your kiddo will see that you're there at school too. So getting to the communication thing, there's a lot of different ways that you can communicate with the classroom outside of volunteering, although the volunteering is the best, right? Sometimes people have a daily log, and this can be a little piece of paper. It can be a notebook that goes back and forth that the aide puts into your child's backpack and just leaves you a note, or the teacher leaves you a note. Easy peasy, right? Everybody can do that. Now they have apps where you can get a daily notification. Same thing, it's a daily log, but some teachers are like, oh, I'll just put it into the app how the day went, right? But it's great to keep whatever notification comes home, so either a notebook or an app or something, so you have a record of it. So that if something happens and at some point they go, oh, well, he's been kicking Billy, and you go, why have I not heard of that before? Show me where that is in the daily log, and you want to have, so if it's little pieces of paper, hang on to them just until the end of the school year and then purge them, right? A token economy also works for this too. I've told you guys about in the beginning, we had Daddy dollars and Disney dollars, and if you got a certain number of stickers, and the aide would just put she had a little stamp, and she would put little stickers on the thing, and if you got a certain number, then he got a Daddy dollar, and then when he got 44 of them, I don't know what, some arbitrary number like 44, we would go to Disneyland. But that also told me how things were going. Later on, we noticed patterns, like he would have a good morning, but his afternoon was hard because he was getting tired. And so we had to put a little bit more incentive. So it was, if you got a gold star in the morning, one gold star in the morning was enough to get the Daddy dollar, but we wanted to see a little bit more oomph. So you got to get 2 in the afternoon and then you get the Daddy dollar, right? Or you could do the opposite and make it easier for them, whatever it is for them to get to the reinforcement, right? Again, the notes, it's my least favorite if they send just like a free-floating note. But think outside the box for this. Like what would be the way? It could be as simple as that when you pick your child up, that they have a little paddle that they hold up that's, a red, a yellow, or a green for how the day went. Right? And that if the day went well, you don't have to overly discuss it, right? But if you get a red, that means that the teacher's going to email you. Talk to them and see what it is. Some teachers like to communicate and others don't. They see it as just more work for them. Some are control freaks and they don't want you to ever talk to the aide. I hate that, but some of them want that. Remember to reward everyone for communicating. This is hard because sometimes the teacher calls you and says, well, this happened, and you want to go off on the teacher and go, why are you so entrenched in your thinking and cannot see that my child is brilliant, right? But you must reward them for calling. Otherwise, they won't. And knowing what's happening at school is everything. So even if in the moment you're ticked beyond all possible belief, your ticket is torn because the teacher is saying something, start by going, you know what I really appreciate about you? I appreciate that you're calling me. That means so much to me. I really want you to know how much that matters to me. I know it sounds smarmy, but lay it on thick. It's for your child, right? Reward everyone, yourself and them, and your child for communicating. In the long run, it will be really, really good. Liliana says, that's what I advised all of my parent volunteers, but wash hands, wash hands, wash hands. Yeah, I don't know right now with COVID how much they're letting you guys in the classroom. That never occurred to me. Carolyn says, good afternoon. That's exactly what they did to me. No aide in the IEP to ask questions. Yeah, when you go to IEP meetings, they won't allow the aide to be there. That's very common, you guys. It's frustrating. I think it's wrong, but I had to make my peace with that. There was nothing I could say because they don't want to pay them to be there. That's really what it comes down to. And they don't want you talking to the aide because then they lose all control. And you might find out that the aide doesn't know what they're talking about. I've had that happen. I had an aide one year where she just was obsessed with talking about my son's handwriting. And I was like, no, he's supposed to be giving a keyboard. She was like, but he really needs to work on the handwriting. I said, no, we're working on that at home. You don't have to work on that anymore. It's not in the IEP. In fact, it's in the IEP that he gets the keyboarding, whatever. And she was like, but I really think that you're missing the boat because he's going to have to fill out job applications. And I leaned across the table and I said, what century are you living in? Yes, he will fill out job applications, and who fills out a paper job application anymore? No one. It's online, right? And she was like, no. And of course, then they're like, can we call you out in the hallway to the aide to get her away from me? Because I'm like, why is this woman having a say in this? She's not designing the program, right? She's implementing the program. Why is she so hell-bent on the handwriting thing? And I wanted her gone. That's why they don't want us in the same room with them, because that's what happens. So we make our peace with that, but I say suck up to the teacher. Suck up to the teacher and ask them how it's going with the aide. Get the aide really nice presents when it's Teacher Appreciation Week, when it's, whatever holiday, nice gifts, right? But suck up to the teacher. Okay. Carolyn, I really need an email. Is it my email that you need? Shannon@autism-live.com. Shannon@autism-live.com. Carolyn says, this is what I do. No, they try to ignore me since I've been watching you. Oh my gosh. That's hilarious. Not. It really isn't hilarious, but they can't ignore you. They can't ignore you. Put things in writing and say, I need a response. They'll tell you things. I had people tell me, oh, our email is down. And then I would go over to the office and say, I'm here because your email is down. Don't be afraid. She says that I've tried volunteering and they haven't called me back. And that might be because of COVID. They might not be letting parents in the classroom. I have to admit I had not thought about that, but please wash your hands so much. Okay. Teacher sends a communication form that needs to be signed. We also have Class Dojo as well, so an app. I also text the teacher and have a response within an hour, even when she's sick and not in the school. They do the token economy as well. He's working on this with my son, following instructions. I tell my son to say thank you and please to everyone he comes into contact with. Now he does it automatically because it teaches my son respect and makes him feel good. You're doing a great job, Lori. And Caitlin, yes, I will look for your email later on. But they cannot ignore you. They can't ignore you. They don't want to pay for the one-on-one aid. And I will tell you what else they do. They do a slowdown where they'll say to you, oh, we got your email. I'm going to ask so-and-so, and then we'll get back to you. Well, that eats up a week, right? And then their email was down, that eats up another week. And then they go, well, you know what we should do? We should do an assessment about that. Let's do an assessment, or let's do a functional behavior assessment. And they'll make up a big plan of how they're going to observe your child for 30 days. And at the end of 30 days, then we'll need 30 days to review the results. And then it's like, well, now we're at the holiday break, so let's look at it again when we come back in January. And they postpone and then suddenly it's the end of the year and they're like, oopsie, we didn't. And every week that they made you wait was a week they didn't pay for the aid. Skip all of that and say, we don't need to do an assessment. Pull out that page 805 that I was telling you. Liliana says, LOL, you're so right about scoring brownie points with the teacher. You got to have the teacher on your side. And if you can't get the teacher on your side, can I tell you something else that I learned the hard way? Ask to switch teachers. I am the maddest at myself about the year that I kept working with the school to work with the teacher to get it right. And then at the end of the year, I realized I just wasted an entire year for him. And it tore at his self-esteem. Don't let it go. If you cannot get on the same page with the teacher and everything in your gut is going, this teacher's never going to go there, ask to switch teachers. Make a big stink fuss about it. Okay, troubleshooting. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong with an aide. Your aide is absent. There has to be a plan. And schools love it when your aide is absent. Do you know why? Because then they report back at the IEP, well, the aide was absent for 10 days and your child did just fine without them. So keep a record, ask your child, work out a system with your child every day where you ask your child, you know the name of the aide and you say, was, Mr. Felix there today? And so that you actually know, because sometimes the school won't tell you. And you can tell them, I need you to tell me if the aide is going to be absent. And you can say it's written into the IEP and you are in non-compliance if you don't have an aide there. But then there's the other side of the coin. When the aide isn't there, then they pull in a substitute aide. And who is that person? And are they highly qualified? You need to ask questions. And it gets a little crazy, right? Sometimes the aide is too busy doing other things. Now, you should have an understanding about what your aide does and what they're there for, and be clear with the teacher about it. I was always clear with the teacher and said, I'm not running your classroom. I'm a former teacher, you're a teacher, I'm not running your classroom. If you see that, it is better for you to give the instruction to my child, you give the instruction to my child, and if the aide is making copies for you while you're giving that attention to my child, fabulous. That's a great use of the aide. And I was very clear about that. You should be clear with your teacher about what your expectations are of using the aide. And the teacher would always say to me, oh my gosh, thank you for being so reasonable in getting it, because sometimes I'd rather it be me prompting the child than the aide, and you're okay with her grading my quizzes while I do that? Yes. Now that was me, you decide for you. But sometimes the teachers don't bother asking you, and they don't think that your child needs an aide, and so they send the aide out of the room to do copies. This is why you volunteer, because you see this and you go, I don't think so. Sometimes you have an aide who is clueless. And if you see them, sometimes there will be aides who are way too opinionated, who think that they are the person who is writing the program, like the person who felt that my son should be working on handwriting at school. Thank you. That was the year before. Read the paper. It's not happening this year. He's keyboarding now, right? They could be clueless about that. They could be clueless about interventions. They could be over prompting your child. You really, really, really need to stay on it. This is where the volunteering and the consultation and the observation comes in, but I'm going to tell you, you're going to learn more by volunteering than anything else. Sometimes the teacher doesn't like the aide. I didn't put it on here because I think it's implied if the aide is clueless, you're not going to like them, right? But sometimes the teacher really doesn't like the aide and they clash, and I'm going to tell you to side with the teacher. unless you really feel like the teacher is completely cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, in which case, move rooms, right? But if you like the teacher and you're cozy with the teacher and the teacher doesn't like the aide, listen to them, right? And I said that the teacher uses the aide for other things. I should have said that the aide is busy. Sometimes, you know what else they do? They will set up a classroom and they will have a kiddo who does not have a diagnosis, doesn't have an autism diagnosis, and the parent, there's no IEP, but they should have a diagnosis and they should have an IEP, and the kid is having a really hard time in the classroom and really super struggling. And when kids super struggle in the classroom, they act out, regardless of what the diagnosis. It doesn't have to be autism. It could be that their parents got divorced that year and they're being shuffled back and forth, but there's a kiddo in the classroom who's having a hard time. Well, we know that there's a one-on-one aide in this classroom, and we know that that one-on-one aide is assigned to this kiddo, but we're going to put this tough kid in this classroom because we know that the teacher's got help and support. They do that all the time. And what you find is that the aide ends up being more of a one-on-one aide to the kid who is having all this challenging behavior. We had that one year where there was the kid who eloped and his parents, no clue at all. I don't think they were even telling the parent, but he would elope. And so my aide was out on the field chasing the kid eloping while my son was in the classroom. I didn't find that out until I was volunteering. So, and that's the kind of thing where you have to speak up and say, no, somebody has to talk to that parent, that child needs an aide. And they're not going to tell you what the child's name, they're not going to point out the parent, but you can be there at pickup and you can see what's happening. Then they might not like you volunteering anymore, but that's the whole thing. Sometimes they change aides or they have rotating aides. I don't mind it when a school has one aide in the morning and one aide in the afternoon, because for me, it kind of takes care of the aide is absent thing, because then they can say to the aide, the afternoon aide, can you do it all afternoon? But I will say that part of what happens then is that there isn't this fealty from the aide of, I got to be there for this kiddo. I think you do have more absence, but they're covered. So, and a lot of times they get assigned to something else and they leave and they're changing the aides and you got to rearrange whatever. A lot of times you'll have an issue that there's something that you want the aide to do and they won't, whether it's walk your kid out to the car or whatever, fill in the blank, question mark, what is it that, what are your problems with aides? You got to work it. Whatever the problem is, you got to work it. You have to make it more aversive for them to have the problem than not. So, and they're going to try to do the same thing back to you. So if any of this stuff goes on, you call an emergency IEP meeting. And they have to have a meeting. They have to. They can't, every state has different, but it's like 10 days that if you ask for an emergency IEP, they have to have it within 10 days. I don't know whether that's business days, it probably is. But they have to allow you to have the meeting. And meetings waste their time and they're expensive for them and it takes teachers away from prepping and they don't like to do it. So force them to do it every time something like this happens, and you'll find what they do is they go, let's get her the aide that we don't have to do these things over. Sorry, but that's the truth, right? You have to work the problem. The year that I had the teacher that I should have, I so regret. I should have, after the first little kerfuffle, I should have said, I want to move to the other teacher. Because I was there volunteering and I was seeing that the other teacher was great and was wonderful and so on and so forth. But I like to think that I like to give teachers an opportunity, right? I kept working it. I stayed on it. But I think that you have to do that. You have to keep working the problem. But if you see that you've already had like 3 IEP meetings and it's not getting better, it's time to say, we want a different situation. And it might not be the teacher. It might be something else, but we want a different situation. Sometimes you have to move your kid out of a classroom because there's another kid in the classroom who's like doing something that's disruptive or upsetting your child or preventing them from getting an education, and that's a reason to move them as well. Okay, fading the aide. You always want to say to the school, we're not asking for an aide forever. We want the aide until they don't need it anymore. And schools love to hear that because they want to fade the aide. So we'll give you an aide for this first semester, and they'll say things like this all the time. We'll give you an aide until the holiday break, and then we'll reevaluate. And you know what you say to that? Fantastic. Let's do that. And then you come back in January and you go, it's not ready. They're going to pressure you, and you're going to have all your ducks in a row and say, here's why. He's doing really well. What's your evidence to the contrary? Now, they might have, well, the aide was absent for 4 days and he did just fine then. So that's why you want to keep on top of that. And you want to keep examples of work on the days when the aide isn't there and go, no, he didn't finish this. And on the other days, he did. So keep your own data, right? Don't allow them to fade the aide too soon. Now, everybody's going to have a different school of thought about this. Everybody knows my son was treated at CARD. That was our ABA provider. And I was going to listen to CARD, what CARD said, right? I loved CARD, loved what they had to say. But they said that it was time to fade the aide, and I disagreed. And so I said, not yet, because that was my mama's instinct, and I said, not yet. And so we kept the aide, and then the next year we faded the aide, and it was, so that would have been, CARD said that at the end of 3rd grade that he was ready to fade the aide, and I said, nope. So we kept the aide for 4th grade. Then in 5th grade, I agreed that it was ready and that it was time, and we faded the aide. And there was a new principal, and I hadn't factored that in. And by the holiday time, we had put the aide back in. And then we had an aide. She was useless in 6th grade. And everybody was like, well, he's for sure done with aides. But we were going to junior high. And so for junior high, I insisted on an executive functioning aide, and even CARD was like, what are you doing? Is the best thing I ever did. So that by the time my son went to high school, no aide. And fewer and fewer supports, and now he's in college and he doesn't need anything. There are many people who would tell you that I waited too long. I disagree, and I have my data to show that we did it right. Made the dean's list while working full-time, first semester of college. I'm sticking by what I did. But what I did isn't what's necessarily right for your kid or you. But don't do it too soon is what I'm going to tell you. You can, in the interim, give the aide other tasks. You can say, I want the aide, and I want the aide for executive function, which means that they track, did they turn their homework in? You can ask for them to be a note taker, because if your child isn't taking the right kinds of notes, they can take notes for practice, but they can study from there. So there's other things that an aide can be doing that could be beneficial to your child. They could be working on social skills, and they will tell you that we don't do that, blah, 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 except go back to page, 805 that we said in the beginning. Ask yourself the question, what do we need right now for this student to be successful now and long term? And then how could an aide help that? Sort of reverse engineer it. How could that help that? And for junior high, we saw he can do all the work. He can keep up with all the work. He can't, on the schedule that they had, because it was a rotating schedule where, on Monday, you have periods 1 through 8, and they go 1 through 8. But then on Tuesday, you go 2 through 7, and then 2 through 8, and then 1 is at the end of the day. Oy, right? That's a lot for any of them to get used to, and handing things in and knowing when to hand them in. He had the aide to help him with executive functions, and he killed it. He crushed it, and it set him up for success in high school. And he would have been lost without it. So what does it take? And they were like, we don't do executive function aides. And I was like, well, it says here that you need to be setting him up for, so what do you mean you don't? You don't have that program. This is an individualized education program. And by the way, if you've watched the show before, at the end of the 2 years that he was at junior high, the junior high school said to me, thank you, we didn't realize we could do this, and now we can see how many more kids can be successful using this. And I said to them, just remember, it's all individualized. Somebody else is going to need something different, but it's all good. They were like, wow, who knew this would work, right? Okay, so that was the end. Word to the wise here, though. You got to manage your state. There are going to be times that you're going to drop the ball and something's going to get past you, and you have got to be kind to yourself and not beat yourself up about it. You can't do all the things that you do during the day and take care of your whole family, and some of you are probably working, whether it's part-time or full-time, and be present at school 100% of the time. There's no possibility. I know parents that have taken a job in the school just so that they could be there more, and they don't have eyes on everything 100% of the time. So you got to be kind to yourself. Set yourself up for success, but don't just set it and forget it. Keep going back, keep looking at, be present at all those IEP meetings. Look at the things that they give you for the progress reports, and if you're not getting regular progress reports, go back to the IEP and see how often they're responsible to report to you what the progress reports say. But please volunteer when you can, be in that classroom, get eyes on things, the things that you will find out, just amazing. And you will learn who's good, you will learn who's just phoning it in, because people are, but I'll tell you what else you'll learn. You'll learn who the teacher is for next year. And one last word about this, I said that it's important that you reward the people who are, communicating. There's also this, you have to reward people who are showing up and showing you on a daily basis that your kid and their education matters. Now, it doesn't always have to be a gift. It doesn't have to be an elaborate thing. The thing that I was taught eventually, and I don't know why this didn't occur to me as a former teacher, but I got known for my letters of recommendation. So when the school year would come around, anybody who was great on my son's team, I would write them a letter of recommendation and talk specifically about why they were so awesome. I would say that my child was on the autism spectrum and that they, went the extra mile, or what a good teacher, or what a good OT, or whatever. And I would give them that in an envelope, signed and dated, that they could have forever in their files. But I also sent a note saying, I want you to know that I've given this to the principal and asked them to put it in your personnel file. And oh my gosh, I got known as the mom who does that. And you know how you get known as the mom who, or the dad who, right? Get known as the parent who writes the letters of recommendation, because then whenever they would have the back to school year-end thing where you get to go and see all the work and it's displayed all over the classroom, we would go in and help set that up, right? Are we getting ready to end here? We would go in and help set that all up, and we would be there for whatever the presentation the teacher would do, but then we would duck out and go to all of the teachers for the next grade. Well, by the time I was done volunteering and writing letters, I knew all of those teachers. And I would have already had a conversation and said, oh, we're really hoping that Jem can be in your classroom next year. And for some teachers would be like, oh yeah, that'd be interesting. And I would know, nope, that's not the one, right? But other ones would go, can I please have Jem in my classroom next year? And I would go, yes, because that's the teacher who wants him, and that's the teacher who knows that I'm gonna write them a letter of recommendation. That's how you start out the next school year cooking with gas, okay? So, and it doesn't cost you anything but time, and time is valuable, but it's kind of fun. It's fun being able to say to some people, you really made a difference. Can I tell you that my son's 9th grade English teacher, the letter of recommendation that I wrote for him, I wanted to frame it because he's the person who taught my son that he's a writer. My son, who had all the BIPs because he didn't want to write any task with a pencil, once he was keyboarding and he had this teacher, and now my son is at a pretty competitive school in their program for screenwriting. He wants to be a writer because of that teacher, and I made sure that I put that in his letter of recommendation, yeah? So reward them, the good people, but you can get an aide. You can get an aide, and you can get a one-on-one aide in a mainstream classroom if you want it. Please check out that page that I gave you early on. And write to me if you want the PowerPoint, Shannon@autism-live.com. That's it for us. Tomorrow is Stories from the Spectrum, and then we are back on Monday with a whole another week next week. We're winding down on the Parents to Parents. because in September we're getting back to doing interviews with people. But if there's a topic, by the way, we're going to ask Dr. Granpichet to do all of these topics that I've done from her point of view, which will be a whole other information from the point of view of an expert, not from a parent, right? Okay, so but write to us if there are specific topics that you want, because we weren't planning on doing the one about getting an aide, but when you guys said so many things after we did the school one, we were like, oh, we got to do that talk. So if there's a specific talk you want me to talk about, let me know, because we're getting down to it. The summer's almost over. All right, you guys, we'll be back on Monday, well, tomorrow, with Stories from Spectrum. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.